We're ready to go, you guys. Stop the frivolity. It's time to get started. Everybody's ready? Okay. We are live. Welcome to our electronic 2022 Plan and Budget Development meeting on October 20th, 2021. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, Regional Council is practicing physical distancing. Myself, Councillor Galway, Councillor Kiefer, Councillor Shantz, and Councillor Clark and Chair Redmond are in the chamber. Did I miss anybody? Okay. I will now look to our clerk to perform the roll call.
Thanks, Councillor. Chair Redmond?
Present.
Councillor Armstrong?
Present.
Councillor Clark? Councillor Erb? Councillor Foxton?
Present.
Councillor Galloway?
Present.
Councillor Harris?
Present.
Councillor Jaworski?
Here.
Councillor Jowett?
Here.
Councillor Kiefer?
Here.
Councillor McGarry?
Here.
Councillor Nowak?
Present.
Councillor Shantz?
Here.
Councillor Strickland?
Here.
Councillor Verbanovic?
Just easy.
And we have regrets from Councillor Lorenz.
Thank you for that. The land acknowledgement, I'd like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather virtually today is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe neutral people. We acknowledge the enduring presence of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today, their achievements and their contributions to our community. Looking for any declarations of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Seeing none, we have a staff presentation for the report of 2022 Plan and Budget Overview for information. And I believe this is, we're going to call upon our own CAO, Mr. Lochner, for opening remarks.
Thanks very much, Chair Jowett. It's hard to believe we're talking about 2022. Today, we're going to talk about our shared vision for a world-class community, a vision that was laid out in the strategic plan and advanced through the development of the 2021 plan and budget. The team will walk through the key principles, the process, community inputs that have shaped the development of the plan for next year, along with where we will shift our resources to. We'll provide an overview of the draft plan and then move into a discussion and details on how we will we resource that plan. And we'll finish with next steps in the process as we work towards finalizing this plan by December. First, it's important to ground ourselves in the vision. Over the past year, we've talked a lot about what building a world-class community means. And one of the things that I love most about talking to staff and residents about building world-class is that it means something slightly different to everyone. And that's okay. If you talk to someone out at the landfill or someone at the op center or a small business owner or a nurse or a new resident, someone who perhaps is struggling with finding stable housing, their faces always light up. And while their vision of what world-class means to them may be different, what doesn't change is their why. At the end of the day, everybody wants something better. And at the end of the day, building a world-class community is about people. People talk to me about their sister, their brother, their father, their mother, their neighbor, someone perhaps who just moved to our community and is a new resident. And everybody talks to me about creating the best possible future for every single person who lives here. And that's pretty inspiring. In June, you might recall that Rodriguez presented the globally recognized elements of a world-class community. And he also spoke about the growing need to focus on equity and sustainability in building communities of the future. A world-class community isn't about being one thing or being the best at everything. It's about balancing the needs of a growing community. It's about innovating. It's about how the important elements of a community connect together to deliver the best quality of life for our residents. This incredible vision that you've laid out for us is one that inspires me, and I know a lot of people who work here at the region every single day. I don't believe there's any other community better positioned to thrive and build world-class than the Region of Waterloo, and it's catching on. The region as a corporation isn't alone in talking about our world-class community. We're seeing so many different people from all walks of life talk about their vision for community in the future and what world-class means to them. Again, it's pretty diverse. These are just two simple tweets that we pulled up. One speaks to the world-class innovation cluster in the region, and the other talks about world-class farms and how fortunate we are to live here with both of these incredible world-class assets. Building out this vision is going to take time. I know all of you on council know I'm pretty impatient, but this is a journey we're on. We're making great progress, and I want to say, I know I said this when I first joined the region, we couldn't even be talking about world class if it hadn't been for the 30 years of hard work by councils, by staff, by leaders in this community that brought us to this place. So this vision's going to take time. We've made great progress already. We've made further progress in 2021 in spite of a pandemic. And as we plan for 2022, we're going to build on that strong foundation and continue to ground ourselves in that vision and strategy to deliver what's best for residents. Before I turn it over to the team, I just want to bring up these foundational principles that guided us. These were provided by council. This guided our development of the plan and the budget over the summer months and into the fall. You'll recall discussing these in June, and they've served certainly as important touchstones for us as we decide what we should move forward on, where we should put our resources, what the priorities are, and so on. The first one, and we've already talked about this, is building on the success of the past, not just 2021, but the years beforehand. The second one's ensuring we continue to invest in the organization's success. And we know that, by that we're talking about our people, our 3,800, and I think today it was 81 staff, both part-time, full-time, and contract. We know that this is a tremendous pace of change going on in the world. We have to capitalize on the learnings of the pandemic, that we have to support our staff through this. And we also need to be mindful of the health and well-being. And I know we constantly get called out for that to say, hey, keep remembering, keep supporting staff. And in particular this year, I think we're all in a fragile state, and we've taken that to heart and continue to do as much as we can to support our staff across all of our departments. We've also focused on finding opportunities for efficiency and consolidation without impacting service levels unless they were in line with the changing community demand. We've also made sure to focus on long-term financial sustainability and thinking not just about 2022, but thinking about 2023, 2024, and beyond, rather than just simply trying to balance this year and leaving the problem for our council next year or in the years to follow. And last but not least, remaining mindful of the affordability and the impact of user rates and tax rates on residents. So these were the foundational principles. I'll now turn it over to Connie to talk about the process we undertook in a little more detail about our 2022 plan.
Thank you, Bruce. Building on the great work done in 2021, this year we embarked on a new planning process to develop the 2022 plan and budget. There are a number of key reasons for this shift, but the most important has been the ever-increasing complexity of the needs in our communities. When we think about the big challenges that we are tackling together, things like affordable housing, climate action, health and well-being, these are big community challenges that cannot be solved by one system or sector alone. These are challenges that the region is working on collaboratively with other levels of government, community partners, and residents, and of course our area municipalities as well. This complexity means that we need to think differently as an organization about the way that we plan. The region delivers services across so many different sectors and areas, and our people truly are our greatest asset. We're so fortunate to have experts in diverse areas. And when you bring together that incredible expertise in areas such as planning, child development, housing, transportation, public health, economic development, water, climate action, waste, the ideas that we're able to come up with and the solutions that we're able to develop are so much stronger. One of the great learnings of the pandemic that we've talked about quite a bit has been what we can achieve when we work together and leverage our combined strengths. And that's really the spirit in which our planning process was facilitated this year. You'll recall that we came together in June for a session on vision and articulating the key elements of a world-class community. We reaffirmed the alignment of the strategic plan with those elements and worked with leaders across the region to develop the plan for next year to deliver on those priorities. We also had many similar sessions with the region's senior leadership team. And this is a newer meeting structure at the region that brings together senior leaders across different portfolios to drive strategy, innovation, and collaboration in new ways. With the leadership of a small group of leaders, we developed a new template that was launched that allowed each leader to identify their top priorities to achieve the strategic plan. They also identified ways that they can innovate to deliver services in different ways to support residents, and how they could utilize this innovation to support delivering on a balanced budget and that affordability principle as part of the plan development. These templates help to form the draft annual business plan for next year. We also held plan and budget review meetings, but this year held them with a diverse cross-section of leaders and support teams, including those from IT, HR, communications, and more, to identify points of intersection and support that would be required to deliver on the plan. You'll also see that throughout the entire process, a huge pillar has been around community engagement. And one thing we did differently this year was start the process a month earlier to allow for a more robust community engagement process. I'm going to spend a few minutes walking through the preliminary results of our engagement findings through the 2022 Plan and Budget Survey. I will say that this is still a live engagement, so we will come back in November with a more fulsome report where we can dig more into the details. But today I can provide you with some high-level insights that I think are really helpful to our conversation. If you recall, our strategy for this engagement was a bit different. We tried to promote it a little bit more broadly and really enhanced our communications around it, which certainly has paid off in terms of overall respondents and awareness in terms of development of the plan and budget. Typically, our responses for plan and budget engagement are about 500 or less residents. This year, we're at about 1,100 already, and the survey is still open. We also produced a promotional video, which had over 8,500 views. And this was something really new for us, to translate the video into other languages to reach more people. Using dynamic media to reach people is so important, and I'm really proud that we're trying new ways and new things to better reach and engage residents. We also promoted the engagement through our networks, such as the Local Immigration Partnership, the Children and Youth Planning Table, the Chamber of Commerce, among many other partners. And we're not done yet. The survey is still open, and there are lots of other opportunities for community and partners to contribute, whether through email or through our public meetings into November. And finally, a reminder that the region engages with community and partners regularly, and this ongoing dialogue and input is already built into our draft plan. We do formal plan and budget engagement, but we also take into account the learnings and listening that we do all year with different partners, stakeholders, and community. This slide shows you demographic data about who responded to the survey. The survey approach was not designed to provide a representative sample of our community, but rather an open opportunity for anyone to provide input. And we boosted our communications and outreach, trying to reach as many people as possible. There are a few things that stand out from looking at the respondents. First, we got responses from all areas of the region, including a greater response proportionality from Cambridge than in previous years. In terms of age, responses were provided in all ranges from 13 to 17 to 80 plus. Responses were, though, significantly smaller at the end of the distribution. Overall, this is a higher age distribution than the community as a whole. And when we look at other dimensions of diversity, we see less representation from communities typically underrepresented. For this survey, we decided to collect more data on diversity than in the past, as this data provides a good baseline for us to improve upon, and this is a priority for us moving forward in our engagement activities generally as an organization. We have to get better at engaging everyone in our community. And this means a greater range of engagement throughout the year using more inclusive practices, which is something that we're working on and we'll speak to at Council later this evening as we talk more about equity, diversity, and inclusion. I'm now going to walk through some of the questions we asked that you can hear a little bit about what we're hearing. We kept the survey really simple and easy to respond to. Our first question asked respondents to rank our strategic focus areas by importance to them. As you can see, environment and climate topped the list, followed by healthy, safe, and inclusive communities. And coming up fifth was sustainable transportation. One observation here was the average rankings were quite close to one another, which in many ways shows that no one single focus area was way ahead of another in terms of importance for people in the community. At the same time, it does show us that environment and climate action, as well as healthy, safe, and inclusive communities, are top of mind for people right now, which I would say is probably not a big surprise, given what's happening in our community across the country and globally. We also asked respondents to provide input on how to balance service delivery with affordability. Looking at the different respondents, 8.3% wanted us to reduce taxes and cut services. Just about 20% wanted us to increase taxes just enough to maintain existing services. And just over 50% of respondents wanted us to increase taxes to improve or expand upon services, which gives you a sense of how residents responded in terms of the ongoing challenges of resourcing and appropriate service delivery. We also added into open-ended questions, and today I can share early findings on one of those. We asked the community what services mattered most to them. And this is a question that a lot of people answered, just over 900. For those who've done a lot of surveys, getting answers to open questions is not always an easy thing to do. And so really pleased with the response rate on this. And you can see the breadth of responses was really broad. Actually a lot broader than what you can even see on the screen here. We've tried our best to bucket those into categories to make meaning of some of the different pieces. You know, you can see cultural services, active transportation, waste management, affordable housing, fiscal responsibility. Interestingly, in contrast to our first question on ranking our focus areas, transportation-related items were most referenced here in terms of priorities and importance of service delivery. We're still digging into the data, but you can start to see the things that make up a world-class community are many and interconnected. Overall, I think the biggest observation is that this aligns very closely with the plan that we'll walk through tonight, and that is a really good sign. Finally, we can't forget that other engagement activities are happening all over the community that seek to surface data on the challenges and opportunities that we need to focus on as a region. Many of our partners undertake this work collaboratively and add such incredible insight to our work. The reality is that no one source of data will tell us everything. We need diverse approaches to engagement to get a better picture of the diverse experiences of residents in the region. And this slide gives you one example of that. The Immigration Partnership recently conducted a survey of approximately 1,500 residents across the region. This data is still being fully explored and isn't available yet and hasn't been formally released. So really privileged to be able to share some preliminary findings from the Immigration Partnership survey with you today. As you can see, the slide drives home the reality of experience from an important perspective. The top challenges for immigrants to the region are finding work, making connections, and access to affordable housing. Not an unfamiliar story for many in our community. But something that is even more concerning is that 24% had experienced discrimination or being treated unfairly. Equity is central to building our community, and I hope you will see that as an important theme throughout today's presentation. Finally, I want to let you know that more information about this data will be coming forward in the coming months, and we hope to continue to collaborate with our partners at the Immigration Partnership to bring you a bit more data throughout this process. All in all of this incredible input from community has been critical to shaping the plan and will continue as we work with community and residents on implementation. So with that overview of the planning and development process, the work that's gone in and the inputs to the 2022 plan and budget, I will now turn it over to my colleagues who will run through a high-level overview of the draft plan for next year. This reflects some of the major initiatives in each of the strategic focus areas to deliver on our collective vision to build a world-class community. With that, I will turn it over to Craig, who will kick us off with environment and climate action. Craig.
Yes, excuse me. Thank you very much, Connie. And good afternoon to regional councillors. I'm delighted to be able to begin this portion of today's presentation. Collectively, as a corporate leadership team, we've worked diligently on creating a plan for 2022 that brings council's vision to life. You'll see through the course of the next 15 minutes or so that the plan is integrated and connected across priority focus areas. These are focus areas that you have approved as part of the overall strategic plan. And I have the honor of speaking a little bit about how the 22 plan tackles the challenges faced by our environment and climate change. As you know, climate change presents a profound threat to our community, our country, and the planet. It's a complex problem that we're aiming to tackle in our 2022 corporate plan. To address this problem means changing how we live, how we do business. It also means changing how we operate as a municipality. It's not a problem we can solve on our own, of course. With significant community collaboration, the region has spent a number of years creating a blueprint for action, as you've seen, for example, in the recent Transform WR strategy. At the region, our 2022 plan begins to materialize this strategy across all areas of municipal business. You'll see, for example, that we're directing more waste away from the landfill, improving recycling, managing organics, and protecting our water resources. We see further examples as we green and future-proof our many assets such as fleet vehicles, our transit buses, our ambulances, and the investment in technology that allows us to maximize our resources and track progress. We continue to work closely with the area municipalities to build a complete, connected, state-of-the-art, active transportation network that supports sustainable choices. This is a puzzle that has many pieces, but it's a most critical puzzle from a transportation and environment perspective. You'll hear more about the transportation piece shortly. Through our 2022 plan, we acknowledge that the impacts of climate change are not felt equally across the community. Heat waves and air quality, for example, can have a greater impact on vulnerable populations. The development of a climate change and health vulnerability assessment tool will help reduce these inequities. At the region, we continue to respect the unique rural-urban balance that our residents enjoy. We continue, the interplay between urban and rural is something we bear in mind when making decisions at the region, and our 22 plan was developed with the countryside line and our food sources in mind. This helps us plan to protect critical natural heritage areas and to consider a vision for greenfield communities as part of the update to the regional official plan. And this is particularly important as rural communities grow and more people migrate from urban centers that surround us. I'm now going to pass it over to Mr. Bartholomew Saunders to speak about sustainable transportation, one of those additional important pieces of this puzzle. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Dyer, and good afternoon, Regional Council. It may seem a bit odd to you that the Commissioner of Community Services is speaking to you about transportation, but as you know, I often speak about the need to integrate services, and one of the best things about this plan is that what we are doing in this plan is just that, looking at services for clients in an integrated way or for our citizens in an integrated way, and I'm sure you'll see that throughout this plan. Transportation investments and improvements are integral parts of the 2022 plan, and they fall into a number of our focus areas. You just heard Craig speak about the greening of our fleet, a key investment as we tackle climate change and invest in transit. Sustainable transportation is also a foundation of a thriving economy, and it also supports and grows health, safety, and equity across the community. When we think of sustainable transportation, our minds often go to transit. At the region, we have seen the many benefits of a quality transit system. As we look to build ridership on existing transit, and as we look to build light rail, Cambridge, one of the many benefits that come to my mind revolve around access to employment for social assistance recipients and others living with low income. It's an easy connection to make because a well-rounded transit system increases the breadth of employment opportunities for social assistance recipients and others in low-income situations. Transit expands the area of employment search, the opportunities for employment, and subsequently increases economic participation, both through personal spending and the opportunity to participate in taxation. It's at the core of the work that all of this leadership team does. Essentially, sustainable transportation for the region of Waterloo is a rethinking of how we help our residents move around this growing community. In 2022, we look at this focus area as a significant enabler of positive change. This focus area touches many of our other areas. We have seen firsthand in recent months that transportation is imperative if we want the economy to thrive. Our economy depends on active transportation, transit, and other modes of transportation. Workers, patrons, and investors look to modes of transportation when deciding where to live, work, invest, and visit. I'll now pass things on to my colleague Shu Li, Dr. Wong, to talk more about the steps we are taking to ensure that our economy thrives in 2022 and beyond. Shu Li?
Thank you, Douglas, and good afternoon, Chair and Regional Council. A thriving economy doesn't just stimulate an array of job opportunities or provide meaningful careers. Ultimately, it underpins the experience of residents. Like all communities, in 2021, we continue to live through unpredictable times, but we're moving through the experience, moving from crisis response towards recovery. And that is good news for our economy. In 2021, Regional Council has helped protect not just our residents, but has helped our local economy, the lifeblood of our community, to survive during turbulent times. Throughout the pandemic, we have worked with businesses to help them implement practices that support staff and patron health. We have focused on an education and support approach versus an enforcement approach. We understand that these are complex, trying times for businesses. We understand that staff are tired and business owners are worried. Our plan for 2022 will continue to support long-term economic resiliency through recovery programs. Our plan aims to be equitable, to support economic prosperity that is shared with everyone. Our plan includes targeted equity investments for local businesses and entrepreneurs. In 2022, we will continue to focus on driving economic growth through investment in transportation infrastructure, as Douglas mentioned. We will stimulate ridership growth on our buses and light rail system, previous investments that help residents go to their places of work at stores, cafes, offices. These are investments that help keep our local economy alive and are the foundation of future success. And we will continue to look for economic solutions that are relevant to our future. On the tech side, we are pushing forward with the economic cluster as well as Smart Waterloo Region. In our plan, you will also see arts and culture initiatives to build inclusive community. These initiatives are also critical to supporting our economy. You will see financing and funding strategies for key infrastructure such as the King Victoria Transit Hub and Breslau Go, and strategies to develop employment lands. These investments are part of our larger strategy to build connected communities to allow our residents to move about in our community for jobs and careers. We will double down on the promotion of the region's brand as a place that allows the local economy and its residents to thrive. I'm now going to hand things over to my colleague Rod. He will speak about engaging and responsive service, and will also touch upon the importance of the region's brand as we compete on the national and international stage. Rod?
Thank you, Shu Li. In the past 18 months have provided us with an unprecedented opportunity to reimagine how we deliver services. We continue to capitalize on these opportunities to serve residents better through the reduction of bureaucracy and red tape, by investing in enhanced digital assets, and by working even closer with our municipal partners. In the plan of 2022, We want to accelerate these opportunities and provide fast and efficient services for all residents. This is a new era for municipalities, and we see the Waterloo region leading the way as we compete with other communities for talent and investment. So you'll see that we're building services that are human-centered, that have more streamlined digital options, and that are individualized wherever possible. These services will enhance the resident experience. To add transparency and drive improvement, we will set up new corporate performance systems, including clearer KPIs, dashboards, and transparent reporting that are relevant to council, stakeholders, and residents. We will also continue to evolve our communications approach. As Shuli mentioned, never before has good communications been more important. It helps us build trust, provide good service, and supports collaboration. It paints a picture of who we are as an organization and where we are going. The 2022 plan incorporates enhanced communications built around a new brand strategy using compelling storytelling through digital social channels. The plan recognizes that finding ways to listen, learn, and collaborate with residents, partners, and Indigenous peoples is critical. This is critical to ensure strong relationships and trust, to ensure good decisions are made, and that good inclusive service design happens. Council, relationships with our residents are a foundational piece of our 2022 plan. And with that, it's over to my colleague, Kim, to speak about our plan to make this a healthy, safe, and inclusive community.
Rod, can you hear me?
Hi, Kim. I can hear you now. Yep.
Can you see me?
I can see you now too.
Okay, perfect. Just want to make sure. Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rod. Council, you've heard today that we have been faced with accelerated challenges over the past 18 months. This has been very evident for our health, safe, and inclusive communities focus area. Many challenges that already existed in the community have been exacerbated. These challenges include the impacts of systemic racism, inequity, and social injustice. As a leadership team, our plan recognizes that being healthy and safe means having equitable opportunities and economic stability, strong social connections, and easy access to services. At the organizational level, we recognize that diversifying in staff helps create an inclusive environment and an environment that better reflects the residents we serve. To be healthy means to have economic stability and opportunity, strong social connections, and access to supports. Health is everybody's business. As an example, we know that an economy thrives when there is affordable childcare, reliable ways to get to work, where there is affordable housing for people to live, and where communities connect. Upstream innovation in community safety and well-being has been a focus over the last 12 months. Our affordable housing trajectory has been very impressive and is on target. An interim equity team has been established while longer-term plans are being developed. We have been taking immediate action all across the organization to show progress and commitment to reconciliation and equity. We're supporting the Waterloo Region Integrated Drug Strategy. We're building a multi-year diversity, equity, and inclusion plan. We're improving road safety. We're advancing truth and reconciliation with partners to guide long-term change. A focus of the 2022 plan is an overall system redesign and better integration with partners and community to deliver services. We continue on our journey of upstream innovation, and we look forward to continued dialogue with Council on these critical issues. This is a long journey that we all are on together, but we are confident that we are taking meaningful steps along the way. Thank you, Regional Council, and I will now pass the presentation over to Thomas, our final speaker, who will talk about our people.
Thank you, Kim, and the rest of corporate leadership team. Regional Council, you've heard on a high level an ambitious plan that we as leadership team have collectively set out for 2022. You are aware that it's our people who make this ambitious plan happen. It is our people who bring the plan to life. We do this by working with Council, by working with each other, by working with partners and residents. Unprecedented change has been one of the themes of today's presentation. To keep pace with this change and to serve all of this community, we need to evolve our culture and the way we work in a deliberate way. Luckily, throughout the pandemic, we have uncovered an organization that can move fast and that can keep pace with change. We will build on the momentum in the years ahead. Staff must continue to excel and enable a culture of high performance during a period of constant changes. This includes a culture that can work collaboratively with Council and members of the community to set clear goals, track progress, and be accountable for outcomes, and ultimately achieve the results we all want. While building on today's momentum, we recognize that our people need support, and so our plan includes investments in mental health and well-being programs and services. We understand that the labor market is competitive. To ensure we can continue to attract and retain the best, we need to enrich the employee experience during the employee life cycle. We need to continue to catch the spirit of change. We know that post-pandemic, returning to the status quo is not an option. Residents have new expectations and staff have new expectations. We want to attract and retain a workforce that is world-class. We are big on implementing equity strategies and building welcoming workplaces so all staff can be and do their best. Some of the foundational initiatives moving forward this year include a culture change initiative, the reinvention of acquisition, and the development of a talent management program. We continue to modernize how and where we work, again leveraging new technologies through our ways of work initiative and space optimization. Before I conclude, I do want to tell you a bit of a recent story about regional staff. And I think, as you all know, our GRT bus operators are up early, they're early to bed and up early every day, providing the service that people need to get to work, to go shopping, to get to medical appointments, restaurants, parks, literally everywhere. And a few days ago, one of our operators noticed a young man, a 10-year-old, on his bus. He was alone on his bus. The boy seemed pretty scared. And the operator wondered what was going on. So the operator approached and started talking with this young boy. And the story was he'd been kicked out of his home and he was on his own, didn't know where to go. The operator did what he's supposed to do. He called the police and the police were on their way there. And while the operator was there with the boy talking to him, he asked him, are you hungry? And the boy was. So the operator on his own, he got out, he went to a McDonald's, got a Happy Meal that the boy could have while they were waiting. It's a short story. I don't know how it turned out for the boy. I hope it turned out well. But the story shows what caring and dedicated regional staff we have and how they go above and beyond every single day to provide service to all of our residents. So I want to conclude the leadership portion of today's presentation by recognizing the work that all of our 3,500 plus employees do every day to carry out Council's vision and more than just Council's vision. I'm fortunate to say that we have a proud, dedicated, engaged, and caring workforce that are eager to continue our work in 2022 and beyond. Thank you, and that is the end of, I think, all of our presentation, and I'm not sure who I have to hand it off to.
So thank you for that. It was good to see you guys shaking that up a little, wasn't it? I think that was pretty engaging. So I guess we'll hand it over to Bruce to maybe do a wrap up. What do you think?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Thomas. I love that story. I think, anytime you get into a plan and budget session, there's a tendency to just jump into the numbers. And the story that Thomas told, that's really what world class is about. It can be some giant poster on the wall, some nebulous thing in the sky that, we talk about. But what Thomas said is exactly what it is. It's one employee at a time, one interaction at a time, one helping hand at a time that we're going to continue to build a great community. And like you, Thomas, I can't be prouder to work with this group. So thank you so much for sharing that story. This plan, I hope Council, is with me in stepping back and saying, boy, is this ever a big organization. We provide such a wide range of services every single day, 24/7. And I can't thank not only the senior leadership team, but all of the staff who, when we were given a challenge to continue to try to protect all of the valuable services that we provide, as well as meet the new demands of this community in a growing community, growing population, that's a pretty big challenge. This is not easy. I think it was Mayor Jaworski or Councillor Jaworski who said earlier this year, bit of a cautionary tale, municipalities are in for it in 2022. We have so many pressures on us as the level of government closest to the people. And I would say, I started my career in the municipal sector over 30 years ago. And I thought it was hard then, and going through the Ray days and so on. And then the Mike Harris government, I can't remember a time when we've had the combination of so many challenges as well as so much opportunity. So tons of hard work ahead and tons of hard work to date. Thank you to the entire team for your passion and the dedication to responding to Council's request. Before we move forward, Madam Chair, I really wanted to ask if we could take the opportunity to hear from Council, and then we'll get into the budget piece. I believe there may be a break in between, but we'll certainly get into the budget piece. These are three questions, not necessarily, Madam Chair, to go through in sequence, but more as prompts to Council as you think about questions that you may have as you heard from the team. So I'll turn it back to you. Thank you.
Wow, okay. So thank you for that, Bruce. Much appreciated. So I'm going to look and see if anybody's ready to kick this off. Any reflections coming out of that? Is that what you're looking for, Bruce, for us to just toss this around a little bit? Does the draft plan reflect the most important priorities? How do you think communities' needs have changed over the past 12 to 18 months? Oh my goodness, that's going to be a long one, I think. What opportunities or challenges do you see from a resourcing people's partners funding perspective? Big questions. Anybody want to kick us off? So, okay. So we're still kind of, I think, processing a lot there, Bruce, because we are taking a different approach here. I can see Councillor Galloway and Councillor Nowak. So let me make sure I've got this in the right order, you guys, because I know that, yeah, it is. And Councillor Galloway, please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, thanks to the senior leadership team. That was an excellent presentation, and I thought in large part it captured our strategic plan that Council has approved, and identifying the major areas that I'm sure that we'll be discussing as the budget discussions carry on. The first observation I wanted to make is really to Connie, and that has to do with the community engagement. And the one particular statistic that I took note of is the number of homeowners versus renters that responded to the survey, and it was some 70% homeowners, 17% renters, when I think it's the demographics are more like half and half in our community. And what can we do to get more people engaged who are renters? That number actually reflects as well, I think, the participation in municipal elections. Renters are much less likely to vote. and what, if any, strategies that we can identify to get them more engaged, both in terms of these kinds of surveys and all the various engaged WR surveys that we do and public consultations that we do, as well as exercising their municipal franchise. And Madam Chair, I have a few other observations as well on the presentation.
So do you want Connie to speak to that?
Maybe just briefly, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Connie, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for the question and through the chair. I found that statistic really interesting as well. And I think it speaks to for more innovative community-driven approaches to engagement. One of the things that we've learned in working with community through vaccine rollout has been the power of peer leadership and getting out into community. And so if we're going to reach more people, we may actually have to engage peers in door knocking to have engagement conversations. We may need to engage other community leaders to help host conversations. I think we've certainly shown that, a survey is not the most effective way of engaging this population. And there's lots of work and innovation to do with community to figure out how we can elevate that voice.
I guess the concern I have is that, and I'm speaking in very broad generalities here, homeowners probably have higher average income than renters do. And so we hear more from more affluent people than we do from less affluent people. And that's a broad brush, I understand. And the concern I have, of course, is that many of the people who are marginalized, racialized, vulnerable, require our services maybe more so than other groups we hear less from. And we have to be careful not to overemphasize the input from the more affluent part of our community as opposed to the less affluent. And maybe that's just more of a statement, but I just think that's something we have to be conscious of when we're evaluating the surveys and the data that comes in from that. Can we see the questions again? Because the three questions.
Who's in charge of the presentation? It's awesome. Thank you.
I thought the presentation was excellent. I really liked the way it was all integrated. I liked the way that the commissioners spoke out of discipline and as an indication of how the senior leadership team is integrating this process. I think in response to question number 2, I would say that in the last 12 to 18 months, we have seen a couple of major things. This is outside of the pandemic, of course, which has been kind of overarching everything. But the community has come very much in favor of affordable housing. There's just a whole lot, in terms of people even on the street, in faith communities and various organizations coming to the table on affordable housing, which of course is one of the pillars of our strategic plan. And while there's always been support for affordable housing, it's certainly become much more acute over the last 12 to 18 months. The other matter, of course, that would fit into that question as well is the whole anti-racism, Black Lives Matter, Indigenous, all those various efforts that have really become, again, much more acute and focused. And I'm so glad to see that we have a plan to deal with that, and we'll hear more about that later this evening as well. One thing that I thought maybe, I'm not sure where it fits, but Council did approve during the 2021 budget process an upstream initiative, And I didn't see any evidence of that in this plan. I know that we have, at least on a temporary basis, put that off in favor of the community well-being, safety and well-being plan, which of course was mandated by the province and took some priority, but I certainly don't want to lose sight of that. And I don't know if it deserves its own bullet in that presentation, but the community conversation that Council approved during the 21 budget process, I certainly do not want to lose sight of that. So that would be in response to question number 1. And as far as question number 3 is concerned, well, Madam Chair, this is your first budget. There's always challenges with the priorities, the needs, and of course the resourcing. And I really look forward to that discussion as staff kind of unfold the budget and the debate that ensues in regards to the priorities as we do try to achieve our strategic goals. So I'll just leave it at that, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Tom. I appreciate those thoughts. Councillor Nowak.
Yes, and like Tom, I thought the presentation was excellent. Again, I just wanted to zero in on the sustainable transportation and possibly a comment that Bruce had mentioned earlier with regard to more people moving out to the rural areas. And we see that on a regular basis. The homes don't last very long when they go up for sale out here. So, and because of that, I think that going to question 2, the community needs have changed significantly out here. When it comes to transportation, I think some of the rural communities are severely underserviced when it comes to transportation. So the question I have is there been any discussion on how these rural areas could become better connected to core transportation infrastructure? I'm not sure whether this is the appropriate time for that question or whether when we get into the nuts and bolts of the budget, but I thought I would throw that out at this point to see if there's any comments. Thank you.
Well, so who wants to grapple with that? I do think that's a valid question. And I think as a regional council, we all grapple with the supplying of needed service, at some of our extremities in the region, right, Joe? So don't think we ever forget you guys.
Appreciate that.
But you won't let us anyway, will you?
No, I won't let you forget.
But I'm glad you raised it. So I think we should all just kind of keep that in our minds is making sure where everybody's getting the equitable service that's needed to have a good community, a strong community, right? So thanks for that. Chair Redmond, looking forward to your commentary.
So my comments are a bit more global. I too really like the presentation, and I think that it does reflect communities' priorities and certainly the stated priorities of this council. A lot of the federal and provincial challenges actually have municipal solutions. And I raise that because I think the third question was about funding. And I think that we need to be very wary of being part of the solution when it goes on the local tax base. So I think that we can certainly be a partner. We are a service provider for a lot of really important social services that our community wants and needs. But I think that we need to continue to require the federal and provincial government to step up too. I think there's a substrate of mental health issues that have really, really come to the fore through the pandemic. And I didn't see that particularly earmarked. And again, not that we have to own it, but I think that the services that we provide and the people that are impacted by mental health often end up as part of our shelter system or part of our social services. I think that the vaccine rollout demonstrated to us how amazingly cooperative, collaborative, this community can be in animating a focus. And I think we did an outstanding job. I also look at some of the investments like IT, and I think that last year council was very intentional, and I know Councillor Galloway already talked about one of the investments, but I think about ramped up investment in affordable housing, and I think that that truly is showing leadership and finding collaboration and ways to leverage our assets to draw in the faith community and other developers. So I think that is a wonderful acknowledgement of intentionality when we do that. I would have to tell you too, though, that I think this is a very, very polarized community, and I think that will ease as we move forward. But it strikes me that there are some very loud voices that are demanding things from a certain perspective. And I think we have to always keep in view that larger picture and what our purpose is and what we have authority over to change. And I think all of that is articulated through the budget.
Great, thank you for that. Councillor Banovic.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair. And I too want to express, I think, generally speaking, my pleasure with the presentation that's before us. I think it certainly talks a lot about the kinds of things that we need to work towards and strive to achieve as the world-class community we're striving to be, and as the 10th largest population center in the country. I think as I look through the list, certainly the kinds of things that I've seen over the last 12 to 18 months and the things that I'm hearing have partially been touched on already, and that's in the social services space. Anxiety around childcare, anxiety around supportive housing and the shelter system, anxiety around affordable housing. And Councillor Galloway was right that more than ever, I think the public is looking for us to really, focus our energies and our efforts in some of these areas that are primarily, within the responsibilities of regional government in collaboration with other partners. I think the one thing I will caution, and I'm seeing it a little bit again today, is we need to make sure that we're doing the areas we do have primary carriage over really, really well before we start moving into areas that are primarily the responsibility of the lower tier. We see that somewhat in some of the economic development stuff that's being reflected here. And I go back to the report that was done and approved by all of the municipalities back in 2013 that was essentially set the responsibilities. Here's what the region does, here's what the lower tiers do, and here's what Waterloo Region Economic Development Corporation does. While it's certainly possible to change that through collective agreement and consensus, I think we just need to be careful that it doesn't just accidentally morph that way, because there will be choices to be made around resourcing here. And I really want to make sure that we're focusing first and foremost on the ones that we have primary carriage over. And so that's what I'll be looking at for throughout the budget.
All right. Well, thank you for that, and I can appreciate that. I think all of the area municipalities work hard on their own economic development, and I do think we try hard to keep the lines between the two roles pretty clear. But thanks for that reminder, Councillor Verbanovic. Councillor Kiefer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I too appreciated the presentation, and I think the staff did a great job and putting out the priorities as such. I too have concerns in terms of how we're going to invest in terms of this budget. I mean, affordable housing is at the top, transportation, social services, in particular transportation. My Cambridge colleagues and I, of course, are looking forward to the LRT, and so I raise that concern in terms of I know there's advocacy going on, but my worry is that the provincial and federal governments aren't going to come fast enough for that particular service. It's concerning when you when you see that the and he's a good friend of mine, Mayor Matheson of Stratford, gets the GO service before Cambridge, and that's that's unbelievable. But anyways, good for them, and I think one of the keys is the fact that where is some of the funding that we need to do some of the things that we're going to do come from? We can't just lay it on the taxpayers to say, okay, we're just going to increase the taxes. There's got to be some buy-in from the provincial and federal government, and I think we all know that. But how we go about that, I guess, is more advocacy or light a firecracker under somebody's you-know-what. But anyways, I'll leave it at that. I'm like the rest of my colleagues. I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thanks. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Kiefer. Councillor Jaworski.
Thank you. Through the chair, excellent presentation, excellent PowerPoint. This one is a keeper. I don't say that very often about a PowerPoint or a slide deck that needs to be kept, but this is one that needs to be kept. So congratulations to the team. Congratulations on your presentations. I like what my colleagues have been saying. As Barry Verbanovic or Councillor Verbanovic, Barry has mentioned, we need to make sure that we don't have overlap with other organizations or levels of government. I think that's important. But I'll focus on point number 3. It's what opportunities or challenges do you see from resourcing, people, partners, funding perspective? Well, funding, I think, is self-evident. But I think with the partners one, we need to make sure that we work a lot through partners, and we need to make sure that we have strong partners, that they're as strong as they can be. A great example is Capacity Canada has been running Manulife board governance boot camps. That is something that has really helped a lot of organizations, and we work through with a lot of not-for-profits. And I think whatever we can do in our efforts to make sure that our partners are as strong as possible is something that helps us in the long run and supporting their advocacy, as I know we do. But I think perhaps it's more overt advocacy that we need to do, especially to upper levels of government, and helping whatever partners that we work with to be stronger through our efforts, which may not be so much in funding, although I know that's well needed, but may not be so much in funding, but as in leadership and organizational skills and becoming true partners with each and every one of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Shantz.
Thank you.
Wrong way. Is it working? I think Councillor McGarry was next.
Over here. Go ahead. Okay. Hello.
Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Shantz.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Just to agree with most of what's been said so far. Thank you to staff for the presentation. It was refreshing to have a different way of looking at it. I guess to maybe highlight a couple of things. One concern I have, and I know it's necessary, and we do it at the township, we do it at all our budgets, and we look to the federal government and the provincial government to support our initiatives. But then that adjusts our priorities. So I think that's a challenge, how we hold our priorities, even if that's not where the other funding is coming from, or can we even hold them? So I see that as a challenge. And another point I wanted to make was similar to what Dave just made, Councillor Yaworski. We need to collaborate with grassroots organizations as well. So make sure that we're not just collaborating within ourselves, but also to reach out and, I find often there's grassroots organizations and people who come to us looking to do things. And so how can we support them and bring them together with the resources they need to do some of the things that maybe we can't. And then to also riff off of Mayor Nowak as well on the transportation in the townships. And this is just a bit of a one of my things, I guess. We're always going to have cars on the road, and so in the townships, we need to support that in certain ways, and not, as well as active transportation and public transportation. I'm fully supportive of that, but we also have to acknowledge that we will always have cars, and how can we support the environment and still support that kind of transportation as well.
Thank you for that, Councillor Shantz. Councillor McGarry, I owe you an apology because I see from my list that you were ahead of Councillor Shantz, so I apologize for that. Please proceed.
All right. I think it was a few, but no worries. We are all in this together. I did want to connect on a couple of things. Housing seems to be the top priority. Everything else that need. I'm going to turn my camera off. Anyway, the housing need for people has really filtered up to the top, especially in the last 18 months over that. I think it's now recognized that without a roof over your head, other services, other needs are secondary. And some of the services that are provided to people can't be done without an address. People that have housing are precarious in a housing sense, struggle to even maintain or get employment because of it. And when you look at the last 12 to 18 months and the needs that have changed with some of our community members, the hierarchy of needs shows that shelter has overtaken a lot of the other needs. So people are needing to decide between rent or food. It's not both. And I think that the last 12, 18 months has really showed some of the cracks in our society, especially amongst the vulnerable community. But it has also impacted those that have lost or have precarious employment because of the pandemic. So I think there's been a shift. There's now more focus on having to have more of the family income go towards rent and housing, and that does disrupt the other needs such as food security and transportation costs. When it comes to looking at that from a lower tier municipal lens as well as our regional lens here, we understand too that the lower tier responsibilities and the perception that we're the only level is responsible for is a problem when we look at how do we deliver critical services and try and impact some of the issues that we see in our community, such as housing, such as the opioid, mental health, and drug issues that we see, and try and deliver those services when we have the least amount of money in the pie that's split up amongst taxpayers. So I think that the partnerships that we need to continue to leverage in our community from our organizations also need to add to our voices to advocate to the upper levels of government in order to have the amount of funding that's needed for us as the regional and municipal governments to deliver those critical services and impact where we need to. there's a lot of opportunity out there now as we're rebuilding out of this. There's far more awareness, which is an opportunity in our community now. There's more awareness of those cracks in our society, more people willing to step forward to contribute and donate to the food banks and to other critical services that are being provided to people. So now's the opportunity to really try and leverage those partnerships and be strong advocates for the upper levels of government to ensure that the lower tiers, the region and area municipalities specifically, to have enough funding to move it forward. So that's just my overall comments, and I would say that I do agree with the colleagues that have spoken so far on these issues. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
On these issues. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, so thank you. And so I guess I'll take my liberty at the end and just give accolades to the presentation for sure. I like the way things were changed up. And what I'm hearing in summation is several key themes. And, you know, definitely one is our jurisdictional creep versus advocacy. So we have to find our balance there and stewarding our taxpayer dollars, but still delivering world-class community servicing, and hearing all of our voices across all of the area municipalities and understanding how we can hear all of those voices and leaving no one behind. Remember that theme that we always seem to carry with us, leaving no one behind. And then I reflected with Chair Redmond when she talked about healing this polarization. And I think that is going to be a difficult but necessary responsibility from our council and from our area municipalities. I think we need to model the way for good relationships here at this horseshoe and good conversations where we put everything on the table and where we can still smile at one another afterwards. So I hope that I've only added to what I think you're trying to lead here, Chair Redmond, and I hope that I can play a role in that as well. So thank you. So that's, I guess, our conversation thus far. If you'd like to take it away from there, Mr. Lochner. Mr. Dyer, are you there?
I am here, Madam Chair.
There you are. Please proceed.
I'm here. Yep. Thank you so much. In the spirit of the corporate leadership team speaking about areas that they don't have responsibility for, I unfortunately couldn't find anyone who wanted to speak about the budget. So you're regrettably stuck with me for the next 10 slides or so. I'll work through it relatively quickly.
Now, hang on, Craig. I was happy to do the budget for you. I said I would take on doing the whole budget this year.
Yeah, yes, and I was a bit concerned about the impact on our credit rating. So, so with that, Madam Chair, we'll just move ahead to the next slide. I'm just going to provide a very high-level overview of a few aspects of the budget. And we'll start with economic conditions. I'll just wait for a second here while the slide advances. There we go. Thank you so much. So I will go through this in more detail at upcoming budget committee meetings in November, but I thought it was worth at least a brief conversation, if only to reinforce the significant change that has happened over the course of 12 months. You know, normally we would put this slide up and we would see, you know, in some cases, very little change from year to year, but almost without exception, we have significant changes. If we consider the financial situation of our senior levels of government, you know, a year ago, $22 billion deficit at the federal level, $9 billion at the province. That you know, increased materially as we went through the COVID pandemic, but those projections now have been scaled way back as well. So still significantly higher than we were a year ago, but not to the extent as originally anticipated. Consumer price index was at about 0.5% a year ago. If you saw the headlines from this morning, September CPI for Ontario and Canada sitting at 4.4%, the highest change, I believe, in 18 years, if I read the headline correctly. So material change in what's happening from an inflationary perspective. Unemployment rate has improved significantly over the last year, and the Ontario Work caseload has come down as well. On the flip side, cost of borrowing, Government of Canada bond yields up over 100 basis points in the last year. So currently sitting at actually just north of 1.6% compared to 0.6% a year ago. And you've all seen the price at the pumps. And so the price per barrel of oil more than doubled over the last year. So again, I offer this just to reinforce the significant changing economic environment that we find ourselves in as we head into the 2022 budget. And again, more information and detail on this as we get into further meetings in November. Next slide, please. With respect to assessment growth, I'm showing a little bit of history here so you can see how assessment growth has varied over the course of the last 10 years. The line across the top there is the average over that period of time. We had a relatively, comparatively speaking, a low figure of 1.3% in 2021, and we're targeting that level of assessment growth again in 2021 for the 2022 budget. Numbers as of late last week, just under 1.3%, and another week or so of keying at MPAC before the roll gets shut down. So I think we'll probably be maybe just a little bit north of 1.3%. We'll see how things play out over the next week. Next slide, please. So just a reminder of how the three budgets through this term of council have played out so far from a rate change perspective. Property taxes increases in 2019 of just under 3%, 2020 at about 3.8%, and then 2021 at just over 0.5%. You can see the increases there for our user rate budgets, water supply, wastewater, and then the distribution and collection rates within North Dumfries and Wellesley. Zero across the board in 2021 of varying rates through 2019 and 2020. So as we think ahead then to the budgets that we'll be presenting to you in November, if we go to the next sneak peek at the user rate budgets, which as I said, we're all at 0% in 2021. And if we look on the right-hand column here, you'll see the rates that are going to be presented to you at the November 1st Budget Committee meeting. So sitting at 2.9% for both water supply and wastewater treatment, 1.9% for water distribution, and 2.9% with respect to wastewater collection, largely in line with our projections from last year's model, but a little bit higher on the water supply side. This is largely due to some changes in the capital program. Again, we'll get into those details when we meet on November the 1st. In terms of the fixed rate, this is the fixed monthly charge. No change proposed for water distribution, and a $1 a month proposal for wastewater collection. So lots more detail to follow at subsequent meetings. With respect to the tax-supported budget on the next slide, you may recall our discussions back in June. Council provided direction to staff with a guideline for 2022 in the 2 to 3% range. My message for you today is the tax-supported budget is still a work in progress. We're still working away on it. Our current position is above the guideline, sitting at just over 4%, 4.4% in fact, taking into account estimated assessment growth of 1.3%. So we still have some work to do at a staff level before presenting that budget to you in November. I think I can say it has been an extremely difficult process. We've been working away on this now for several months, as Connie indicated in her part of the presentation earlier today. So a significant challenge for a number of different reasons as we head into 2022. We'll continue our work over the next couple of weeks and look to present a budget to you in November, which I understand is rapidly approaching. If we go to the next slide, just a couple of highlights here. Again, we'll have lots of time to go through this in more detail, but the obvious question is, where are we seeing the most significant pressure? So we've identified a number of different factors here. I expect none of this is going to come as a surprise. Most, if not all of it, reflected in the plan that we've discussed so far today. This includes a variety of transformational investments, the reintroduction of transit service levels, the opening of the GRT Northfield Drive bus storage and maintenance facility. We continue to implement the paramedic services master plan. I've already spoken about fuel. We're looking at a 20-ish% increase in the cost of fuel in this budget, as well as ongoing issues with respect to funding development charge exemptions, tax increment grants, our capital program, and of course, inflationary impacts on a variety of expenditure items. And maybe this is stating the obvious, but notwithstanding that consumer price index is at 4%, we obviously don't buy the way a consumer buys. And so we have a variety of different inflationary impacts across various portions of our budget. In terms of the draft capital program, just a few highlights here. We're going to dive into this in much more detail at the November 1st Budget Committee meeting. But we have a number of significant projects and initiatives that are underway right now, including the further development of affordable housing. This is using federal money, provincial money, as well as regional tax dollars as well in order to increase the supply of affordable housing. I've already mentioned the bus facility on Northfield. We have a new police central division, which is going to come online later next year. The terminal expansion at our airport was approved back in the spring. Generator at Sunnyside, ongoing work on our water, wastewater, and roads infrastructure. And of course, the West Montrose Bridge rehabilitation as well. Other projects on the next slide that will start next year are significant bus replacements, both hybrid and electric buses. Water and wastewater upgrades will continue. The transit-related infrastructure at the King Victoria Transit Hub, we're anticipating this is in association with the work that Metrolinx is doing within the rail corridor. That work is planned to commence next year. Affordable housing will continue. Another example being the pedestrian bridge over Highway 7 and 8. So again, more detail, a greater list of projects that we'll be able to provide you with on the 1st of November, as well as an overview of our funding and financing plan. And so just to talk just briefly about some of the risks that we see in terms of the 2022 plan and budget. It maybe fits into some of the earlier discussions about funding. We're continually concerned about insufficient sustainable funding to meet our growing needs and priorities. The demands on municipalities continue to broaden and widen and become more significant. And there's an expectation that we're going to be able to meet those demands with a very, very small set of revenue tools, which I've talked about at length at various budget committees, and which I will do again this year as a reminder that we have a very small list of revenue tools at our disposal in order to meet an ever widening municipal mandate. Our capital program continues to be ambitious as we look to implement a variety of master plans that have been approved over the years. Transit, paramedic services, airport, water, wastewater, roads, all have a series of, in some cases, significant capital expenditure and investments required over the next few years. And so we'll be reporting back on the status of those projects, what they look like over the next several years, and any risks with respect to funding and financing. And then, you know, as we look to implement this ambitious corporate business plan, capital plan, and operating plan for next year, we still need to work on additional transformation within our organization to innovate and to integrate and improve service delivery and achieve some of the efficiencies that we continue to work on. And this is going to require ongoing investment in IT and HR and communications to support some of the change management initiatives. So again, this is meant to be a high-level overview, a lot more detail to follow over the course of the month of November. And so just to make sure that everyone's clear on the process that we'll be following next month, the next meeting of Budget Committee is on November the 1st. We'll dive a little more deeply into some of these economic indicators. We'll provide a detailed presentation on the user rate, operating and capital budgets. This is the water and wastewater budgets. Our annual presentation from our colleagues at the Grand River Conservation Authority will take place. And then we'll go into a little bit more detail in terms of the overall tax-supported capital program, as well as having our first budget input meeting. Later in November, we'll look to Budget Committee and Council to approve the user rate budgets. And then we'll go into a deeper dive into the tax-supported operating budgets, talk about user fees and charges, have a follow-up public meeting. And then on the 29th, the Waterloo Region Police Services is scheduled to present to Budget Committee. And then my final slide, Madam Chair, just an overall view of the budget and plan timeline, which would take us to December 15th budget approval. And just to highlight, we have a report on the council agenda for this evening that is proposing 2 changes to the schedule as originally contemplated. The first change is in about the middle of this page. This would move the November 22nd meeting to November 24th. That includes moving the public meeting. This is moving from a Monday to a Wednesday. And we're also recommending that we add a third budget committee meeting and a third public input meeting, which we have recommended would take place on December the 8th. This is mainly to just ensure that Budget Committee has sufficient time for its deliberations and that we have sufficient opportunity for public input. So with that, Madam Chair, that's my overview of the budget as it currently stands. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them, and you can count on a lot more detail on these and other items as we work our way through the month of November. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Craig. And we'll start off with Councillor Clark, please.
I forget how to work these buttons. Am I on? Okay. It's been a long time. Thanks for that. And I'm not sure whether this is really a question for you, Mr. Dyer, or for Mr. Bartholomew Sanders. But one of the things that I'm aware of and concerned about is the fact that the CERB is ending imminently. And I think that I'm anticipating that the low numbers of people we're seeing on our OW lists are going to skyrocket in the not too distant future. And I'm wondering what the budget considers, not just in terms of costs to the region, and I know that the province pays the actual OW costs, but I know that delivering that service is not without cost. And also what we're thinking, what is it going to mean to residents who are suddenly going to find their income cut in half or cut by 2/3 when they go from CERB to OW?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll jump in if I may.
Please.
Through you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Councillor Clark. We have been discussing this with the province. In fact, the first round of CERB has already ended, and provincially, we have seen a roughly 30% increase in the OW caseload across the province. At this point, it's had no significant impact on our ability to deliver service. We're simply absorbing the numbers into the caseloads that we have right now. We expect that when the second round of CERB shuts down, which I believe is at the end of this month, we will see a similar kind of increase, and I don't anticipate that it will be any harder to absorb than what the current situation has been. I believe that many of the folks who are switching from CERB to Ontario Works will find that it's quite a significant switch to go from what CERB was offering per month to, well, for a single $750 a month. And it will have a significant impact on their ability to manage month to month. That will probably put upward pressure on our some of our other services and service providers, like the food banks, probably some pressure on our low-income low-income emergency assistance and/or discretionary benefits. We won't really know until the numbers actually happen, but I expect there will be some upward pressure on our other benefits that are available and our service providers in the community. But we do know that from the province, we do know that it's going to increase the caseloads.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now Councillor Verbanovic.
Thanks very much, Chair Jowett. Great presentation. Thanks, Mr. Dyer. Just a couple questions on things like CPI, gas charges, and so on. Do we make adjustments based on the current year, or do we get like a 2 or 3 year average? And if we don't, is that something we should be moving to? Because I believe on both of those, for example, at at least in our city, I think we're averaging them out, which kind of evens things out a little bit.
Yes, so through you, Madam Chair, I would say it probably depends on the item, on the specific budget item and its overall significance. I would say it's not usual that we would just take the current price and use that as a figure. So when I think about fuel, for example, the figure, the price per liter that we've used so far in the 2022 budget is actually under what the current price is right now. So we have I'd say maybe a history, maybe a practice of, where there has been a significant change of looking to bring that into the budget, maybe over a couple of budgets, as opposed to, going to a higher level. So we'll look at a couple of things. We'll look at our average price over the course of this year. We'll look at industry estimates of where prices are going to go next year, and then make our best estimate for the purposes of the budget.
So I guess if we wanted to move towards an environment where we were averaging things out a little more, is that sort of a motion or a direction you would want to take from council to take a look at that? Or is that something that we can just ask as information to come back for budget day, and we could, we can then have a discussion at budget time?
So I think our CAO would like to just vet in here, if that's okay with you, Councillor Verbanovic.
Yep.
Yeah, I could, Mr. Dyer, jump in if need be, but Mr. Dyer and I were actually talking about this exact thing today, and we have been over the last number of weeks. When we look at, maybe stepping back a bit, when we look at the demands upon us and we start to take a 3, 5, 10-year view, we will be coming back to council to talk about a potential financial shift and just how do we address the pressures that you're talking about, whether it's fuel, whether it's inflation. I talked earlier in my opening remarks about the demands on this community as a growing community, which I think we all would agree are different than communities that aren't growing as quickly. And I know that Mr. Dyer and team do this work every single year, but now I think is an appropriate time, just given the massive shifts through COVID and the things like the growth of our community, things like fuel prices, that we'll be coming back to council with an update on how we might be adjusting our financial models and our financial projections, as well as some of our financial policies. So that will come back in November. My suggestion would be if we could take that under advisement and provide a more comprehensive response in November, that would be appreciated.
Okay, great. No, that works for me, and we can discuss it more then. On the assessment growth issue, I think there's another issue that's at play next year, although it may not have significant impact on the overall dollars coming in, and that's reassessment. And I flag it because it's something that I had a call from the Globe on recently. Right now, the assumption is that at some point next year, the province will be coming out with reassessment numbers that will potentially be looking for us to implement in 2023. But as we know, reassessment is a very complicated thing that the average citizen struggles to understand, because the overall pie doesn't change, but who pays that portion of the pie does. And because of what we're seeing, particularly with some offices and so on, there may be some shifts between property classes that happen and how that's going to impact things. So there is a bit of a move afoot to try to convince the province to actually continue working. And the other piece that's really important here is for them to be working with all of us on it. And I don't imagine there's going to be much appetite to work with us on it before their election. And then lo and behold, there'll be, the municipal elections later in the year. So there is a bit of a move afoot, and I'm just wondering your thoughts on it, to focus on dialogue next year and see the new numbers actually come out in early 2023, which would then give us the year to work through what that means and implement them in 2024. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that, and especially in light of the fact that we now know there's a November 4th fall economic statement. Should we be taking a position on that sooner rather than later?
Yep, thank you for the question. I have numerous thoughts on the topic of property reassessments. I'll offer a couple. The first is that in my capacity as chair of the regional and single tier treasurers of Ontario, we've been having conversations with staff at the Ministry of Finance for some time now about how and when the province will get back on a reassessment cycle. So as a reminder, the province has delayed the reassessment now twice, once for 21 and once for 22. Every property in the province is currently assessed based on its value as of January 1st, 2016. This is going to become more and more of a problem the longer they leave, in my view, the longer that they leave the reassessment. So I understand the political sensitivity around when assessment notices get sent out. To me, the more important question from a staff perspective is, what's the valuation date they're going to use? And so there's really a couple of key decisions. What's the valuation date? And when will that valuation date come into effect? And then the rest just works its way out as a process. At a staff level, I would say we've been encouraging the Ministry of Finance to find a way to get back onto a reassessment cycle relatively soon, because the longer that it's left, to your point, the more potential shifts we have. And these are shifts in many different ways, between municipalities, between properties within a particular class, and from an education property tax, shifts between municipalities across the province. So again, the key for me is what's the valuation date they're going to use? And in a property value environment that is changing rapidly, that's a very difficult decision to make. And it's hard to imagine everybody being happy with whatever decision they come up with.
Yeah, no, but it's definitely a significant concern, and I think one we're going to need to stay on top of, because part of the challenge, as you know, is them giving that information and making it available to us and giving us adequate time to create different modeling scenarios, how they impact, do we phase in or not, and all that kind of stuff. And so that really is, having the adequate time to do that. I may have an offline conversation further with you on that in terms of, formalizing something to send to the province. Thank you.
Thanks for that. That's a grave concern. I appreciate it. Okay, and so Councillor Foxton, you did have your hand up. You had it up before, Councillor Galway, and then it went down. So are you still in for this?
I just wanted to touch base on what Barry was saying, is that, this is a major, if you look at before the assessment, and I'm going to use my house as an example, it was assessed at about $380,000. Today it's assessed at $1.2 million. So the impact on the tax dollar is going to be phenomenal. And so Barry said having a separate discussion, but I think this is something that all of us have to look at. So Craig, at some point, I think you're going to have to talk to all of us about how we're going to do this. How many people will potentially lose their homes because it'll gone up in so much value in the assessment? So I think that for down the road, I would like all of us to have that discussion.
Well, okay, so appreciate that. Thank you, Councillor Foxton. Councillor Galway.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Two things, or three things. The first is the assessment growth, 1.3, or maybe, Craig, north of 1.3. Is the fact that our assessment growth is somewhat mediocre vis-a-vis previous years, and it has been this way now for a number of years. I mean, there's lots of municipalities that would die for 1.3%, but we have been used to north of 2% for a long period of time, until more recently, as the graph indicated, or the chart indicated. Is it because we haven't had, I look across the community, and right now there's 13 construction cranes. And we've had 12 or 13 construction cranes building large multi-residential buildings now for a number of years. Is it because we are not getting the industrial and commercial properties, which of course pay more taxes on an assessment basis, that the rates have been low? And we also see, considerable amount of greenfield development, although our growth management strategy is working to minimize that. And we've been very successful in that regard. But it still just seems odd to me, as I've asked, I think the last number of years, Craig, the same question, what's the explanation?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm not sure I can give you a satisfactory explanation, but I'll try this. There's a couple things that come. The first is that as our assessment base grows, it takes a lot more new assessment to get a 1.3% growth, right? So we've had growth in our assessment base over the years. So as your base gets bigger, you need more absolute value of assessment to achieve the same percentage. So that's one factor. Sorry, I've got a fly flying around here. The other factor that I will, that I can probably report back on is there has been a gradual reduction in the percentage of commercial and industrial assessment as a percent of the whole. So over the years, we've seen a gradual shift away from commercial industrial onto residential, meaning residential property classes making up a greater proportion of the whole assessment than it did 20 years ago. And I think that's partly because of just, changes in commercial industrial assessment. I think it's also a factor of a concerted, a concerted effort by commercial industrial property owners to appeal assessments and seek appeals, not just within the municipality, but to the extent that they own multiple properties. We've seen this with grocery stores. We've seen this with big box stores, where every property across the province is appealed. And these appeals take a long time to work their way through the assessment review board and through the process. And I think we've seen more and more of that over the years. And I think we're going to continue to see that. And so despite the fact that we have lots of cranes and new properties coming on, we have to take into account assessment that is lost through assessment review board hearings, through requests for reconsideration, through appeals by individual property owners. So I think that's a factor at play as well. But I can provide for you some information on that subtle shift over the last 20 years with respect to the extent of commercial industrial assessment in the region, if that would be helpful.
If that's not too much work, Madam Chair, I wouldn't mind seeing that. I think the work from home issue may actually accelerate that to some extent too, as some of the commercial footprints are being reduced, and as a result, the commercial assessment being reduced. The second question I had, Madam Chair, to Craig is, and maybe it's not within the budget process that you might provide this information. It's on the capital budget, and it has to do with the road capital budget. When we approved ION a few years back, we calculated that we would save $500 million in future road expansion costs. That was one of the justifications that we gave to the community for us to spend $200 and some million on our share of the project. And I'm just wondering how we're going to track that, how that's being manifested and how that is showing up in a positive sense within the capital budget. Now, when I say $500 million, that was over the next 30 years. So it's not $500 million right away. But it was, 10 or more million dollars a year in cost avoidance of roads we would not have to widen, roads we would not have to extend. It's not to do with the rehabilitation of roads, but the expansion of our system. And of course, we're seeing the results of ION and our growth management strategy in terms of the shift in the ratio of greenfield to brownfield development in a very positive way, more than what we actually originally set out to do. So I'm just wondering how we're measuring that, and if or not it shows up in the capital budget in some meaningful way.
So through you, Madam Chair, I think this is something we could report back to the committee on. I mean, it would show in the expansion capital program in the form of projects that I'm going to say aren't there, right? So to the extent that I has achieved that goal, there will be new roads, road expansions, widenings, turn lanes that would otherwise be in the capital program that aren't there. So I suspect the answer is embedded somewhere in the transportation master plan, but I think that's something that I could work on with my colleague, Mr. Schmidt, and report back to Budget Committee on.
I appreciate that. I'm not sure if it has to be done within the context of the budget or whether or not it's a standalone item. I'll leave that up to you. It's just that there are people in the community who remember that. And I think that we have to be accountable for that, because that was a major reason in our logic to go ahead with the light rail transit project. Of course, the biggest reason was the planning aspects associated with it. But on a monetary basis, we said we would save $500 million over 30 years on road expansions. So it seems to me that we should be tracking that in some reasonable manner. And I guess ideally that's showing up somewhere in the capital program in the way of some kind of reductions. I guess, but what I don't want to hear is that, well, that space has been reoccupied by other projects. Maybe that's something I could just leave, Madam Chair, with the staff, whether it's best addressed during the budget process or maybe a report at a future Planning and Works Committee. The third item I just wanted to quickly mention, I thank Mr. Dyer and others who rearranged the schedule. I had requested Mr. Dyer consider a third public input session post the police budget presentation so that we would avoid the controversy that we had last year, where we had a third meeting that was scheduled somewhat at the community's desire. So this way, I think we can avoid having that concern again. And I appreciate that we'll have a third session a week or so after the police budget presentation. Thank you.
Well, thanks for anticipating that on our behalf. Much appreciated. So, Craig, how do you want to respond and give council clarity for the direction with which Councillor Galloway has articulated here? Do you want to just kind of have a separate item report, or how would you like to proceed?
Yeah, so I understand the request and the point that Councillor Galloway is making. So I would say if you could provide me with the opportunity to confer with my colleague, and we'll make a decision as to whether to report back either through the budget process or, as Councillor Galloway has indicated, a separate standalone report at a Planning and Works Committee.
Okay, perfect. Is that okay?
That's fine. Thank you.
Councillor Galloway? Okay. I don't see any other hands. Am I missing anyone? No? Okay. Okay, so any closing remarks, Mr. Lochner, thus far?
Again, a huge thank you. I mean, last year I remember this conversation and we talked about moving beyond COVID-19. And I know our community, everyone in our community, everybody on this team has been through a ton. It's great to see that we have a path forward. It's not going to be easy, as the team has outlined. There's a lot of choices to be made, but I can't think of a better place to have this conversation than the Region of Waterloo. So really excited for the conversations ahead. Thank you very much, Council.
Much appreciated. Okay, so I am going through the rest of the agenda here, looking for any other business. Okay, seeing none, I just want to highlight the upcoming meetings on November 1st at 1:30, the user rate operating budget and capital program. And then November 1st at 6, a public meeting input number 1. And of course, you've heard some of the other meetings articulated, so we'll continue to get those into our calendar, evites, et cetera. And I guess now we'll move into closed, looking for a motion to do so. Thank you, Councillor Clark, seconded by Councillor Kiefer. All those in favor, please do note by hitting the yes or no button, or being a rebel. That is carried. Thanks, everyone. We just need a minute to get